If you were scrolling through social media in early August 2018, specifically around the Frederick, Colorado area,
Yeah.
you would have stumbled upon what looked like the absolute pinnacle of the American dream.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right. I mean, I'm talking about a massive, pristine, 5-bedroom home,
Yeah.
a Lexus sitting in the driveway, and a family that just seemed to radiate this perfect happiness. You had Chris Watts, this fit, handsome, reliable-looking husband. You had Shanann, who is this driven, successful, vibrant wife.
Highly motivated.
Very. And of course, you had their 2 adorable daughters, Bella and Celeste, plus a baby boy, Nico, on the way.
It was the ultimate curated reality. We see it all the time online, right? The highlight reel.
Yeah.
But the terrifying thing about this specific case, and really what we're digging into today, is how quickly that image didn't just crack, it completely evaporated.
Completely.
On August 13th, 2018, that entire dream turned into a nightmare in a matter of hours.
Exactly. And that is our mission for this deep dive.
Right.
We aren't just going to recite the timeline of the Watts family murders because, frankly, the headlines have already done that.
Right.
We have a massive stack of sources in front of us today. We've got police files, interrogation transcripts, psychological assessments, and we are going to use all of that to understand the why.
The underlying mechanism.
Yes.
Yes.
We need to figure out how a man goes from being the perfect dad in those Facebook videos to a family annihilator.
And family annihilator is the specific term we need to anchor on here.
Right.
It's a psychological profile that is very distinct from your average violent criminal. We're going to look at the massive discrepancy between the facade Chris Watts presented to the world and the incredibly dark reality of his psyche, because that gap between the two, that's where the terror actually lives.
It's so true. So let's start with the disappearance itself. It's the early morning hours of August 13th. Shanann is returning from a business trip in Arizona. She gets dropped off at home at 1:48 a.m. And this brings us to the first pivotal figure in this story, someone who I honestly think is a hero in all this.
Nicole Atkinson.
Yes, Nicole Atkinson, Shanann's friend.
Absolutely a hero. You know, in most missing persons cases, there is this crucial window of time.
The golden window.
Exactly. Sometimes it's 24 hours, sometimes it's days. It's this block of time where the perpetrator has a chance to clean up, establish an alibi, and just cover their tracks. Because nobody realizes anything is wrong yet.
Right.
Nicole Atkinson denied Chris Watts that window completely.
She really did. Because Shanann missed a doctor's appointment the very next morning, just hours after being dropped off. She wasn't answering texts, and Nicole didn't just shrug it off and think, oh, she's sleeping in.
No.
She went into full alarm mode immediately.
And that speaks to Shanann's baseline behavior. She was always connected, always on her phone, always responsive. Nicole knew that silence wasn't just unusual, it was impossible.
Yeah.
So she called the police, she went to the house, she basically forced Chris to come home from work. She put the spotlight on him before he even had time to breathe, let alone think up a solid story.
And when Chris finally shows up to let the police into the house, the scene inside is, well, it's haunting. But mostly because of how normal it looks. It wasn't a bloodbath. It wasn't chaotic.
It was almost sterile. But there were details that screamed that something was terribly wrong. Shanann's purse was there. Her keys were there.
Her phone was stuffed between the couch cushions.
Yes. And most damning of all, the kids' car seats were still in the car.
That is the detail that always sticks with me. I don't care who you are. If you are a pregnant mother supposedly leaving the house with a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old, you are taking the car seats.
You have to. It screams staged. It tells investigators immediately that this wasn't a woman who walked away on her own. This was a woman who was taken.
Right.
But Chris was still trying to play the part of the confused, worried husband. And that brings us to the moment the entire country got a bad feeling. The porch interview.
Oh, man. This interview is infamous.
Really?
Chris is standing on his front porch. He's talking to the local news station, KMGH-TV, and he's pleading for them to come back. He literally says, I just want them back. But even back then, before anyone knew the actual truth, people watching it felt, I don't know, it felt off.
Uncanny valley.
Yes, uncanny valley, exactly.
It's because his nonverbal communication was completely contradicting his words.
Right.
In behavioral analysis, we call this leakage.
Leakage.
Right. He was swaying back and forth, rocking on his heels. That is a classic self-soothing mechanism. He was trying to comfort himself because he was under immense, crushing stress. And his arms, if you watch the footage, he had them crossed tightly over his chest.
Like a barrier.
Exactly. He was physically blocking the world out, protecting his vital organs, essentially. It's a
Yeah.
highly defensive posture.
But the thing that the experts in our sources point out, and this honestly gave me chills when I read it, was the grammar, the linguistics of what
Yes.
he was saying.
Yes. He slipped up badly.
Yeah.
He referred to his family in the past tense. He said, I loved them. Not, I love them. He said, those kids were my life.
They hadn't even been confirmed dead yet.
Yeah.
To the rest of the world, they were just missing.
Correct. But in Chris's mind, they were already gone. He was struggling to keep his tenses straight because the dark reality in his head was actively fighting the lie he was trying to tell the reporter.
Yeah.
The mask was slipping right there on national television.
So the police see this.
Yeah.
The FBI gets involved. And less than 48 hours later, we are inside the interrogation room. We have FBI agent Graham Coder and CBI agent Tammy Lee. And reading through these transcripts, I mean, it is an absolute masterclass in pressure.
It is.
It feels like watching a predator being slowly, methodically cornered.
It's a psychological siege. They didn't go in screaming or banging their fists on the table. They started by just letting him talk, letting him spin his web.
Right.
Chris tells them this whole story about an emotional conversation he and Shanann supposedly had at 4 a.m. about separating, and that she just packed up and left to go to a friend's house.
Which we already know is a lie because of the car seats and the phone.
Exactly.
But then comes the hammer, the polygraph test.
Now, we do have to be clear here. Polygraphs are not lie detectors in the strict scientific sense, and they often aren't admissible in court.
Sure.
But as an interrogation tool, they are devastating. They measure physiological stress responses, and Chris didn't just fail.
The score is unbelievable. When I saw the number of the files, I had to reread it.
Right. To give you some context, a score of -4 is usually the threshold for deception indicated. So -4 means you're lying. Chris Watts scored a -18.
-18. He didn't just fail it. He bombed it. He practically broke the machine.
It was a catastrophic failure, and the agents knew it immediately. But this is where the real genius of Agent Coder comes in. He doesn't walk back into the room and yell, "You failed, you liar, tell us where the bodies are."
No. He does something that seems totally counterintuitive. He starts being almost nice.
Yes.
He starts talking about the two Chrissies.
This is a textbook technique. It's called minimization. It is pure psychological manipulation designed to extract a confession.
Okay.
Think about it. If you tell a suspect he is a monster, his walls go right up. He asks for a lawyer. But if you offer him an out, a way to save face or justify his actions, he might take it. So Agent Coder says, look, there's Chris the good dad, the man we know you are. And then there's the Chris who maybe just snapped. Maybe he just lost control for a single second.
He's offering him a narrative where he isn't a cold-blooded killer. He's just a victim of circumstance.
Exactly. And they took it a step further. They actually suggested, and this is controversial but highly effective, they suggested that maybe Shanann did something. Maybe Shanann hurt the kids and Chris just reacted to protect them.
And he took the bait. I couldn't believe it when I read the transcript. He asks to speak to his father, Ronnie Watts, who happens to be there at the station.
Right.
And in the interrogation room, with the cameras rolling, he whispers this twisted half-truth to his dad. He claims he saw Shanann strangling their daughters, Bella and Celeste, on the baby monitor. And he says, in a fit of rage, he strangled her.
It was a deeply calculated lie, a self-preserving lie. He was trying to adopt the exact minimization story the agents had just handed to him. He wanted to be the tragic hero who avenged his children, rather than the monster who murdered them.
But the investigators didn't actually buy that for a second, did they?
Not for a heartbeat. It didn't fit the physical evidence, it didn't fit the timeline, and it certainly didn't fit Shanann's psychological profile. But, and this is the key to the whole interrogation, they had him admitting to killing Shanann.
Right. They got the murder confession.
Exactly. They had a confession for murder. That was the foothold they needed to lock him in and keep him talking.
But this brings us to the really big question. The question that hangs over this entire deep dive. Why? Why on earth would he do this? You mentioned the Family Annihilator profile earlier. What was actually driving him?
To understand the why, we have to look behind the curtain of that perfect Facebook life. They were living in an absolute pressure cooker. First, there was the financial reality.
Oh, right, because they looked incredibly wealthy. The massive house, the luxury car, the constant trips.
It was entirely a house of cards. They had filed for bankruptcy back in 2015, and by 2018, they were drowning all over again. They had about $70,000 in credit card debt. They were actively being sued by their HOA for unpaid fees.
Wow.
And we have to talk about the MLM factor.
Right. Shanann was heavily involved in Thrive, right? The health patch thing.
Yes, it's a multi-level marketing company. And the culture of those businesses is very often fake it till you make it. You have to project success and wealth to recruit others into your downline, even if you are secretly struggling to pay the electric bill. So there was this immense suffocating pressure to maintain an image they simply couldn't afford.
But, I mean, lots of people have debt. Lots of people go bankrupt. They don't murder their entire families.
That's true. Financial ruin is usually a catalyst for divorce, not homicide. The real trigger here was the idea of the fresh start. And this is where we have to introduce Nicole Kessinger.
The coworker.
Right. She worked with Chris at Anadarko Petroleum. Chris had recently undergone this physical transformation. He lost weight, he got fit, he started working out, and he became completely obsessively infatuated with her.
And the timing of this affair is critical.
Very.
Shanann and the kids went to North Carolina to visit family for 5 weeks that summer, leaving Chris totally alone in Colorado.
Exactly. For 5 whole weeks, Chris Watts got to play bachelor. He was going to car museums. He was visiting the great sand dunes. He was having romantic dinners. He got a very real taste of a life with zero responsibility.
No screaming toddlers. No financial nagging.
Just freedom and this exciting new relationship.
And the digital forensics in our sources show that Nicole Kessinger was Googling things like, can mistresses marry? And she was looking at wedding dresses online. She was actively looking for a future with him.
And Chris wanted to give it to her. This is exactly where the family annihilator profile kicks into high gear. Specifically, Chris fits what we call the self-righteous or self-preserving type.
Okay.
In his mind, Shanann, Bella, and Celeste stopped being people. They stopped being his loved ones. They became obstacles.
Obstacles.
Yes. They were the baggage preventing him from having his fresh start and his new bachelor lifestyle in Brighton. He didn't want to deal with a messy divorce. He didn't want custody battles. He didn't want child support payments that would ruin his new life.
He wanted a clean slate.
He wanted to hit the reset button. He wanted to delete his old life entirely.
That is just, it's so incredibly cold. It's treating human beings like unwanted files on a hard drive that you just drag to the trash.
It is.
But as horrific as that motive is, we haven't even discussed the darkest part of this deep dive, the actual truth of what happened that night. Because that first confession, where he blamed Shanann for the girls, was a lie. The real story didn't actually come out until months later.
February 18th, 2019.
Right. Agents Lee and Coder go to visit Chris at the Dodge Correctional Institution up in Wisconsin, where he'd been transferred. And he finally drops the act. He tells them what actually happened on the morning of August 13th. And I really have to warn you, if you're listening to this, this is the part of the transcript that is incredibly difficult to get through.
It is easily the most harrowing account I've ever analyzed. It reveals a level of detachment and cruelty that is genuinely hard for the human brain to comprehend.
So he admits he strangled Shanann in their bed. He says he told her he didn't love her. She threatened to take the kids, and then he killed her. But then, and this is the absolute nightmare scenario, Bella walks in.
His 4-year-old daughter. She walks into the master bedroom while he is actively wrapping her mother's body in a bedsheet. She's standing there, clutching her little blanket, and she looks at him and asks, "What's wrong with Mommy?"
I can't even imagine that moment. I mean, most people, even if they had just committed a terrible crime in a blind rage, that would be the breaking point. That would be the moment you snap out of it and call 911.
You would think so.
But Chris, he loads Shanann's body into the back of his work truck. And then, and this is the part that I think haunts everyone who studies this case, he puts the girls in the truck, alive.
This is the crucial detail that completely separates this from a crime of passion or a snap decision. He drove for 35 minutes to the Survey 319 oil site.
45 minutes.
That is 45 minutes to think. 45 minutes where he could have turned the truck around. 45 minutes to look in the rearview mirror at his 2 little daughters who were dozing off and holding each other in the back seat. He had 45 entire minutes to choose a different path, and he kept driving.
Bella even said something during the drive, didn't she? She said, "Daddy, it smalls."
She was smelling her mother's body. It's horrific. But it shows that Chris wasn't a father in that truck anymore. He was just a man disposing of problems. He had completely, totally shut off his humanity.
When they got to the remote oil site, he buried Shanann in a shallow grave, and then he went back to the truck. He took Celeste Cece, who was just 3 years old, and he smothered her with her own little blue Yankees blanket.
And then, and we have to be specific here to truly understand the horror of his actions, he dropped her body into an oil tank through a hatch that was only 8 inches wide.
8 inches. And Bella saw him come back to the truck without her sister. She was 4, but she was smart. She knew something was terribly wrong. She asked him, is the same thing going to happen to me as Cece?
That question, is the same thing going to happen to me as Cece? It proves she was completely aware, she was terrified, she knew what was coming.
Yeah.
And Chris didn't comfort her. He didn't stop. He put the blanket over her head. Her last words were, "Daddy, no."
Daddy, no. And he killed her and shoved her into the second oil tank. He later told the investigators, and this is directly in the prison transcript, that he still hears Bella screaming, "Daddy, no," when he closes his eyes in his cell.
And frankly, he should. That detail, that specific memory of his 4-year-old fighting for her life, shatters any remaining illusion that this was a man who just snapped. You don't snap for 45 minutes. You don't snap through the intricate, exhausting physical process of maneuvering bodies through 8-inch hatches into oil tanks. This was a methodical, brutal elimination of his entire family.
It's just devastating. It's pure, calculated evil. And in the end, for what? He ended up pleading guilty just to avoid the death penalty. He is currently serving 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole.
He traded his family for a concrete box. He wanted freedom. He wanted a fresh start, and he ensured that he would never see the outside world again.
I want to read a quote from the victim impact statement at his sentencing. This is from Frank Rusiek, Shanann's father. He stood up in court and called Chris a heartless monster who took them out like trash. And reading the forensic details of that oil site, it's really hard to argue with that assessment.
It is, but I think it's really important to analyze exactly what Frank said there. Took them out like trash. Because that was literally Chris's mindset. He devalued his own flesh and blood to the point of being refuse.
Right.
And this brings us to the final psychological analysis of this tragedy. Chris Watts wasn't a criminal mastermind. He wasn't some complex evil genius who planned the perfect crime. He was, at his core, a coward.
The coward?
Yes. Think about it. He was a man who was so terrified of conflict, so entirely unwilling to face the messy reality of a divorce, the financial fallout, and the public judgment of others, that he chose murder as the easier path.
Wow.
He literally thought he could just delete his life and no one would notice. It highlights a terrifying level of narcissism, but also a profound, pathetic weakness.
It really does. And it leaves you with a really uncomfortable question to chew on. You know, everyone in the media and in his life described Chris Watts as the nice guy. He was the neighbor who helped you fix your car. He was the quiet, agreeable dad at the neighborhood birthday parties. He wasn't the guy you crossed the street to avoid.
And that's the provocative thought we need to sit with today. We as a society often mistake a lack of conflict for safety.
That's a great point.
We think because someone is quiet or passive or just nice that they are inherently harmless. But Chris Watts was all of those things. He just bottled everything up. His resentments, his desires, his financial panic. He shoved it all down until he exploded.
It really makes you look at the people around you a little differently. We see the highly curated life online. We see the polite wave from the driveway next door. But we never really know what's happening behind the mask.
We don't. And that's why we have to be so careful about buying into the perfect image. Real life is messy. Real relationships have conflict and arguments. Perfection isn't a goal. Very often, it's a warning sign.
Well, that is a heavy note to end on, but a necessary one. This case is a tragedy of the highest order. But digging into these sources really helps us see the warning signs that were there, just hiding in plain sight.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It certainly wasn't an easy one to get through, but it was an important one.
Take care of yourselves out there.
We'll see you next time.